This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. They say a series does not start until the road team wins. Hopefully this series won't start at all as the Orlando Magic force a Game 7. Cavs once again without Jared Allen. And you know what? I'm battling through a shorthanded roster on my end as well. No Carter Rodriguez on this podcast as he is away on a work trip. But joining me today from 92.3, our guy, one of my favorite fill-in co-hosts, Mac Robinson. Mac, how you doing, buddy?
I've been better, Justin, I'll admit, but I will also say this. I will take the L on this one. I will own this. I know I'm a superstitious person, and I know last time during the playoffs, you had me on one time, and that one time was the end of the season. So I will go ahead and just own my 0-2 postseason record when I'm hopping on the chase down. So I will take the responsibility for this. If you want to send all your hate tweets, send them to me at MacRobinson95 on Twitter.
Well, you know, the best ability is accountability, and I can't let you do that because it's my fault. I am probably more superstitious than you, and I booked you. Like, it's flat out my fault. I should have known. I should have known you were going to bring the energy down. I should have known that this would happen. But honestly, this Game 6 was a much better effort out of the Cleveland Cavaliers on the road compared to those games 3 and 4 in Orlando. I thought it was honestly one of their most gritty performances of the season. Battling through a ton of adversity. Orlando going to that jumbo lineup without Gary Harris. No Jared Allen on the Cavs part, so they go with Marcus Morris. Again, I think you see a pretty noticeable discrepancy in terms of the physicality that's being allowed. And, it's frustrating when that also results in a discrepancy in the free throw line where Orlando takes 26 compared to the Cavs 10. But through all of that, through the injuries, I thought that this was a very solid, complete effort. And that starts with Donovan Mitchell, who had probably the most gritty 50-point game that I've ever seen. It was clear from the jump that he didn't have the same burst from his knee, which is obviously concerning coming off a couple days rest. But he had this was something Carter pointed out earlier that we like to with Mitchell, how he's finished the season is, the understanding of what he can and can't do and trying to play within the confines of what his body's allowing him to do. I thought from that standpoint, this was a masterful performance from Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is that, early on especially, and from Donovan in particular, you could tell obviously the outside shot, they were coming up a little bit short, but at the same time, he still showed that he didn't have necessarily that complete burst that you expect out of Donovan. He still was barreling towards the basket. He still was making sure that he was getting those shots up. Again, he was 3 of 9 from beyond the arc, but he put up 36 shots. So he was still going towards the hole, still going into traffic and putting up those contested shots and still getting them in.
And finishing through contact as well.
Yeah.
He almost had a Freudian slip there.
Yeah, exactly. But, for Donovan, he had, of the 10 free throws that the Cavaliers had today, he had 6. So, he was somebody that, like you said, dealing with that injury and really pushing through, it was something where you really had to admire, especially in the fourth quarter. Again, 18 points for Donovan in the fourth. Just the way that he was able to constantly push over and over and over again, despite the contact that he was receiving from a lot of the Magic big men down low. Again, just the ability to still finish through that contact, I thought was really admirable, especially from him.
Yeah, it was a really, really sound performance from him. Obviously a couple times where, I've seen people point out the handle being a little loose at times. Like, that's going to be it when you're not able to load up and get as low to the ground as you typically are, when you're not able to load the leg in the same way. And, the number of times that it was clear he was landing on one leg when he was finishing, like, it's noticeable out there. And, the one thing I've mentioned this before, but the one thing I'll always appreciate about Donovan Mitchell is every single game that he's been in a Cavs jersey, I've never questioned the effort. I've never questioned his compete level. And I really just thought that this was a special and all-time type playoff performance from him. I saw coming into this game that he averages the most points per game in Game 6s in NBA history. He's number one on that list. And this 50 burger is certainly going to help that average. But we got a quick turnaround time here, man. Like, it's unfortunate because, with him battling through this leg, I wanted this game badly. Because when you have that early start time, like the fact that his leg looked like this and he seemed to re-aggravate it a couple times in the game, you don't want to then just have one day off, traveling back to Cleveland, and then that 1 p.m. start time. And, the other unfortunate thing is you lose some time off if you do advance out of this series, right? You no longer have kind of that break before those weekend games in Cleveland. So, sometimes, you can, what you do in one game can make things harder for you the rest of the way. And I think we've seen the Cavs do that, unfortunately, a few times since the All-Star break. But they've got to, take care of business at home. Like, what it's going to really come down to is sticking with what has been working and trying to cut out the mistakes, because we'll certainly get into those mistakes, and I think now's the time to do so. But that's definitely got to be the focus as we get into this Game 7.
Yeah, and I will add to that point as well. Either way, you were either playing in Game 7 on Sunday at 1, or you were playing Game 1 at Boston on Sunday at 1. You'd much rather have the safety of knowing that, hey, at least we still have another 3 games after this one against Boston, rather than, hey, your season's on the line, you go at 1. There you go. But like, again, that's something where it's tough to deal with. But again, this is where, for the rest of this Cavs team, you got to have somebody else step up and somebody to help shoulder that load, especially too. And, again, that's where I kind of turned my head towards, at least looking at how this game kind of unfolded. Again, we've said it all series. At some point, the shots have to fall, because again, at halftime, they shot 7% from 3. Yeah. And, to finish the game, they shot 25%. Again, much better in the second half, but again, you have to be able to, turn that. And if you're able to make some of these shots, you only lost by 7 points.
Yeah.
Like,
and honestly, like, that gets extended at the end with free throws and whatnot. Like, it was a lot closer than that. So, going 7 of 28 from 3, obviously you don't want to see that. The one thing I'll mention about this game in particular is I didn't feel like the Cavs were generating a ton of open looks from 3. Orlando was definitely making kind of a concerted effort to run Garland and Mitchell off of the 3-point line. And I thought they did a good job of, Mitchell obviously did a much better job, but I thought they did a good job of kind of recognizing that and getting to the rim, getting those tough finishes, the little in-between game in case if the defender's not being there at the rim, right? Like, that was the opposite of what we saw in some of those earlier games in Orlando, where they would drive into that contact and they would drive into the defenders rather than taking what's available to them. And I thought they did a much better job of that. And, you talk about Mitchell needing some help. This is a frustrating game for Darius Garland. This is probably one of the more frustrating playoff games, because we got the mix of what we need to see from him and what we need to see removed from his game. Where, the last shot of the game, I think, was Garland's only attempt of the fourth quarter. I understand when Mitchell kind of has it going, or when any star player has it going, there's, a tendency to kind of stand back a little bit, right? To kind of watch the show and take it all in. But sometimes in the playoffs, you need more than that. Sometimes you need LeBron and Kyrie dropping 41 points. And for Darius, again, like, it goes back to, he doesn't need to add anything to his game. He needs to do what he already does well more consistently. And I thought, if you're going to, I guess, kind of defer to Donovan Mitchell as much as he did in the fourth, you need to do it, with pace. You need to at least be a viable threat off ball. You need to, when you're bringing the ball up, not turn it over with the 8-second violations. What we need from Darius, as I said, is nothing that he hasn't done before, but the fourth quarter just simply wasn't good enough for him. And, as the other star that showed up in this game, I think it's fair to ask of him for him to be better in those spots.
Yeah, and I would say this first half from Darius, and even early on in that third quarter, I was thoroughly impressed. And honestly, with the way that he was getting to the basket, getting aggressive, turning on the speed, especially as Orlando was, if he had a mismatch on defense, just turning it up and getting to the basket and really getting aggressive, especially. But again, like you said, some of those times where he defers a little bit, sometimes where again he will allow Donovan to do what he needs to do. But like you said, I mean, when you're that it's that 1A 1B type deal, and we're playing off each other,
Yeah,
you gotta get yours. Like that's the biggest thing is that it's not necessarily anything like you said. It's not anything that he has to add. It's just, hey, I need to get some shots up, or hey, I'm open. Give me the ball. I'm in a rhythm here. Like I think that for Darius in particular, and that's kind of the part that is a little frustrating too, is the fact that again, out if you take away his 3-point attempts tonight, he was 9 of 13 from the floor. Like he was playing well inside that 3-point line. But again, it was just the way that the fourth quarter kind of unfolded. And again, like you said, the only three that he had in the fourth quarter was that three with a second left. And again, you just need to have a little bit more. And especially too, it helps out when you have somebody like Donovan that is dealing with that leg injury, that it makes the defense have to focus on other players outside of Donovan at that point as well. And again, it helps take away some of that emphasis on the paint when Donovan is able to, get to the hole as much as possible.
yeah, and certainly in a game where Jared Allen wasn't playing as well, right? Like the core four makes sacrifices in terms of their box score, in terms of the number of touches they give. Like playing with one another, there's a give and take with that. And the last 2 years have been an experiment of guys trying to get comfortable, trying to figure out how to play with one another. But in those nights where one of them is out, you need the rest to step up. And, Garland did it in stretches, but then he didn't sustain, right? And that's the biggest thing. And that's what makes it more frustrating, right? Like when it's not, hey, there's these limitations to his game, and therefore, like, we need someone else that can fulfill the role. We see that role fulfilled. We see him, we saw him blow by Jalen Suggs, who's one of the best defenders in the league, and create a clutch game time or game winning bucket essentially from Evan Mobley when the team needed it, right? Like we're not asking anything that he's not capable of, and I'm certainly not losing faith in him, but like these are the kind of mistakes that you see 22, 23, 24-year-olds make in these stages, and that's the type of stuff that when players enter their prime at 26, 27, that's the type of stuff that you want to see ironed out, right? Like that's the type of maturity, that understanding that comes with the experience and the physical maturity and all that. I understand there was the time he drove baseline and he felt he got shoved out of bounds, but like you just can't put yourself in those positions, right? Like if there isn't the lane to drive and create an advantage for your teammates, don't be driving baseline just to drive baseline. Like that was one of those instances where I thought it was congested and there wasn't really an opportunity there. The pass to the corner wasn't really available. I believe it was Max in the far corner. So that's the type of stuff that you need to see ironed out of his game, because it's frustrating, because it's understandable that like these type of mistakes are made by younger players, but it's kind of, even though it's not two timelines, you really feel that on a night like tonight where Donovan has such a special moment and such a special game, and you didn't get enough from Darius late, and Evan had, a passive game on the offensive end of the floor.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing too that I look at is, coming out into the third quarter, at the beginning of the third quarter, when you had that small ball lineup, and the biggest thing that really stood out to me was the ball movement, and the fact that you had Darius passing the ball around, Isaac moving the ball around, Isaac moving well without the ball. And, again, the good passing, swinging around, taking advantage of those mismatches when Orlando is crashing in the middle, and you're taking advantage of those outside shots, and you're taking advantage of those extra passes. That's the kind of stuff that I think is really taking that offense and really showing what, like, them going on that early third quarter run. I think that's what was standing out to me, especially. And when you're taking that away and when you're slowing things down a little bit and you don't necessarily have that other option to go to, I think it just makes it so much tougher in a series that already has been in the muck the entire series and just felt like it's just been a gigantic mud fight the entire series. Like, again, it's a 103-96 game in this one in 2024. Like, that's kind of the way that I look at it. But again, when you are struggling to find some of those, when you're struggling to find some of that offense kind of getting generated as well, I think that's when you're starting to run into some issues. And especially, like you said, with Darius, the fact that he is still coming up and he is still growing and he is still developing as a player. I know that Darius is in this second series of his career, but at the same time, it's also one of those things it's a growing pains that you have to deal with in any player's development. But again, it's just one of those things that just has to get ironed out as his career kind of goes on.
Yeah, it's the awkward tension of players at different points in their developmental curve and trying to make it all work at once, right? And man, it's disappointing because it was such a good game. It's obviously the best playoff game they both played at the same time. Just to not get that in the fourth quarter was disappointing. And there were other opportunities where I thought, he made strong plays and just it wasn't rewarded with assists. There was the two times where Okoro kind of got those open threes in the corners that he passed up. And, that's one of those situations where I feel like if the game's in Cleveland, he's taking those shots. But I thought it was the correct move by JB at that point to after he passed up the second one to go, okay, that's the hook. We're closing with our starting lineup, or at least what we have available with our starting lineup tonight. And that opportunity kind of went to waste because JB was playing a tight rotation here, right? Karras had a very tough shift in the first quarter or first half and didn't play in the second half. Georges Niang, I guess out of necessity with Marcus Morris starting tonight, got to play some minutes. It was nice to see him knock down a three. I didn't feel like those minutes went particularly poorly, but it was a tight rotation because when it comes to game 6 and game 7, like the time for adjustments is over. Like it really, really is. You might make kind of in-game adjustments in terms of who's going to get minutes, but it's going to come down to execution. You're not going to change anything you're doing schematically. Both teams know what one another are running on every single possession at this point. And it's just going to come down to who makes the mistakes at those times, who is able to pull it out. And, given how good the Cavs have been at home, particularly, in this series, given how good they've been at home all season and how great that crowd is, you have to feel good about their chances in game 7. But I also recognize that this is a hell of a test. There's the unknown with Donovan Mitchell. There's the unknown with Jarrett Allen. The broadcast mentioned that it apparently hurts when he breathes because of this rib bruise. So that's the less than ideal. I was actually listening to the Dunked On podcast and they were talking about how I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Andrew Wiggins had a bruised rib and he tried to play through it. LeBron posted him up a couple possessions and they had to pull him, right? Like it was too difficult. Any banging on that can quickly turn into a fractured rib. So unfortunately, a season that's been kind of marred with injuries and there's been so much of that adding to the context of the season. We now have this situation where, again, Jarrett Allen's out. Donovan Mitchell's on one knee. Darius has his back stuff. Dean Wade is unavailable, right? Like, it's just thing after thing after thing, and it just makes it so frustrating from an evaluation standpoint.
Yeah, and I feel like that's also been kind of par for the course this year, too, where, again, whether it's the Darius and Evan Mobley injuries, then it's the Donovan injury, then Dean Wade goes down towards the end of the season. Like, there's been so many different injuries that might not have happened all at once, but the cumulative view of this roster and of this lineup throughout the year, you haven't gotten as many minutes with all of these guys together. And not only that, all of these guys together healthy. And so when you do get some of that, it makes it that much tougher to not only evaluate, but also at this point in the series, like you said, we're through game 6. We've gone through 6 games of what each other is going to throw at you. You know what everybody's going to have. And it comes down to one game where you give your best shot. This is all you got. And again, we've seen it in the past where even in, I want to say in the Cavs Warriors series in 2016, you saw a little bit of Dante Jones and Mo Williams get thrown out there just
Yeah.
because, hey, we have these in the tool shed. Let's see if it sticks. Like,
They didn't all
just
work.
no,
They didn't all
clearly
work,
no.
but sometimes you kind of have to throw everything at it, right?
Yeah, you know what? Like you have to every now and then. But like again, that's just where this series is at this point is that at a certain point when all right, this lever I can't use that one. I can't use that one. I can't use that one. All right, well, I guess and even too the Craig Porter Jr. injury at the end of the season too. You don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah.
But like again, balancing all of that, all tying that together at this point and again, going up against a very physical Orlando Magic team, it doesn't make it any easier. And so, again, it's where it's trying to find the right levers to pull, especially against a tough team like Orlando. And like you also mentioned too, it's not a long turnaround. You have on Sunday, and regardless, you have the game at 1. So
I'm not sleeping. I'm not sleeping this weekend. I can already tell.
I think after the last few weeks that with everything with work and everything like that, I think my body literally will shut down. I won't want to, but my body will go, no, you're going to sleep. But like for me, it's just making sure that you're staying within your game. And especially with these guys, making sure that there's going to be a lot of emotions regardless. This is the first game 7 for the Cavaliers. And obviously with the young team with the Magic as well. So there's going to be a lot of emotions that are going to be running rampant throughout this game too. It almost might remind me of that the 06 series against Washington. And, going into like one of those tough series and those elimination games where those emotions were riding high and both teams didn't understand necessarily the emotional baggage that was coming into that was going to weigh you down. Yeah. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how both of these teams go at it on Sunday, especially. But again, just seeing how this series has evolved and seeing how it's going to come down to the game in Cleveland and just leaving it all out there. And then the winner gets to go up against Boston.
Hell of a reward.
Yeah.
I don't think Game 7 is going to be pretty. I
don't think so either.
When you're talking about the emotions of this, like that's in a typical series. When you're talking about a absolute rock fight, when you're talking about the bloodbath that this series has been, I think that's even more true, right? And it's going to come down to who steps up in the moment, who rises to the occasion. This is one of those situations where being at home really is going to help because that crowd is going to help lift them. That's going to help carry them. And, the old adage is it exists for a reason that role players play better at home. They kind of, they step up, they feed off the energy of the crowd. They kind of give you that excellent support that we get from Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. So the interesting thing about a playoff series is you might go in these individual games. You might end up pulling a Karras from the second half rotation. You may, bench Niang for a game. And that doesn't mean necessarily that they're not going to be a factor in the next game. That doesn't mean that they're not going to get those opportunities. And that's going to be a thing I'm really interested in seeing. Like I liked what Marcus Morris gave them in the starting lineup. I thought that was the obvious move after Orlando kind of, replaces Gary Harris with Jonathan Isaac. Did you agree with that move to start Marcus Morris?
Yeah, I think the physicality that he brought to the starting lineup, and again, when you're bringing in Jonathan Isaac, yeah, okay, you got to match it because again, Orlando learned from the last game where again, Cavs went a little bit small ball. They were able to. Then again, now you bring in Jonathan Isaac at that point, add an extra defender and make it that much more difficult. So yeah, I totally understood and agreed with bringing in Morris at that point.
Yeah. And we talked about after game 5, not having a guy like Marcus Morris basically means that you're kind of siloing Evan Mobley to the rim protector role. And oh my God, Evan Mobley, like he needed to be more aggressive offensively. I thought there was too many times that he kind of caught it in tight and was either kind of second guessing because of the length of Orlando or giving it up unnecessarily. But I thought there was just a few more times where I would have liked to see him go up strong, be assertive and attack the basket, right? Like when it comes down to a game this tight any of those kind of missed opportunities really kind of end up hurting you. Obviously, there was some frustration over the times that he did take it to the basket, and particularly the one where he rolled his ankle, where it seemed like there was contact and it just didn't come. But just because you're not getting rewarded on the first couple tapes doesn't mean that you're not going to get rewarded on the next one, right? So just continuing to stick through it, believing in that process, and being assertive on the offensive end, because on the defensive end, Evan Mobley was phenomenal. 5 blocks, that one that he had late where he kept it inbounds and regained control. Like, that's the type of special defensive player of the year stuff that he does that separates him from a lot of other guys that just kind of go out and block shots in the crowd. But you just needed to see more from him on the offensive end, and really on the glass as well, right? Like, this wasn't a strong rebounding game for the Cavs. And for Evan Mobley playing as the lone big man to just get 6, you need a little more from that. You got the gang rebounding. Like, Marcus Morris had 8, Max Strus had 8, Garland pitched in 7, which is obviously big for his position. Mitchell had 4. A couple miscommunications late where it was either Garland or Mitchell's responsibility to get that box out, but I would have liked to see a little bit more assertiveness both on the glass and offensively from Evan Mobley.
Yeah, and I think that Jarrett missing the second game in a row here, I think that also does play into it a little bit. Just because Jarrett usually plays that role, especially on the glass, especially. But I do think that,
from a fatigue standpoint, are you saying?
A little bit, and maybe more so with the role that he normally plays on defense, especially too, where he's able to play a little bit more free on the defensive end, whereas Jarrett typically plays down in the low post. But when I look at how Mobley was doing tonight, I think that there were a few times where I would have liked to have seen more aggressiveness when it comes to him on the glass, especially. But again, when it comes to his one-on-one defense, I thought he was fantastic. Again, 5 blocks tonight is incredible, and like you mentioned too. Again, that block where he was able to not only, swat the shot away, but he also was able to save that and keep that in bounds, I thought was incredible. And showing that athletic ability that he has as well on that defensive end, I thought was fantastic. But again, I think that kind of like you said, just getting the assertiveness, kind of like we mentioned with Garland a little bit, just getting that assertiveness for Evan in particular, I thought would have been huge, and honestly could have, at least made up for a couple of baskets here and there. But again, I thought that overall, because I know I made the mistake of checking Twitter, and I saw some people that were throwing out Evan's name in that, and I'm just like, the way that I was watching this game, I really didn't put any issue, or I didn't take any issue with Evan's game in this one in particular. I thought that overall, with him playing for Jarrett especially, and the backup center being Tristan, only getting 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I thought that, for what Evan was able to do, I thought that he really impressed me overall.
Yeah, I absolutely. And, again, that's one of those things where ebbs and flows of every single playoff series. Like, it's put stress on me, man. Like, at the end of the day, I'm a fan. And, one of the things I love about doing this podcast is I don't have to sit here and, pretend to be a journalist or anything like that. And, looking at this from that objective lens, like, I'm biased as hell. I will tell anyone that I'm biased as hell. I will wear that bias on a sleeve. I will tell you which way my bias is leaning, but I try to provide, at least when it comes to the game analysis, as close to what I believe objective reality is. I'm just going to, view it through my lens as a fan. But, again, it comes down to whether it's Evan Mobley, whether it's Darius Garland, Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Max Strus, George Niang, Donovan Mitchell, Jarrett Allen, if he's available. What we need from them in Game 7 is nothing that we haven't seen before. We need them to play we might not even need A games, because you don't get A games in Game 7s. And I think that's what's so kind of exciting and interesting about this opportunity is, like, Game 7s are ugly, man. Like, they are absolute rock fights. Your theories about basketball, your theories about, things normalizing and whatnot, that goes out the window. It's who can make the plays, who can get those 50-50 balls, who can, ride the momentum of the crowd and close the series out. And I think, obviously I'm sitting here being a little annoyed, being like, God, if Mitchell was healthy, if Garland was healthy, if Allen was healthy, if Wade was healthy, we wouldn't be in this situation. This would be, that we would have handled this series by now. But you have to deal with the cards that have been dealt to you, and I think the Cavs still have more than enough to win this series. And it's just going to come down to execution, because that's what Game 7s are all about.
Yeah, and I also, to add to that, you don't need a full A game. I don't need a full A game from any one player in particular. What I need is your A game when the game counts. And that's the biggest thing. And, hell, I think back to, seeing the Daniel Gibson game back in 2007 against Detroit, where he stepped up for, I would think, 28 points in that elimination game against the Pistons at home to send them to the finals. Like, I think back to, even Donyell Marshall stepping up in a few games in that first LeBron run. Like, it's those little things here and there. And again, nobody talks about how many points Ray Allen had in the finals with the Heat when they ended up beating the Spurs. They talk about the 3-pointer that he made in order to win that game. Like, it's making sure that you step up in those moments and making sure that you're on your A game and staying focused for 48 minutes. That's the biggest thing, is that there have been, sometimes where, you might have, a poor turnover. Again, everybody has them, but again, making sure that in this game in particular, that you're staying locked in, that you're staying focused and staying level-headed, and not necessarily letting, some of these runs get to you at that point. Again, just making sure that from the start, and especially once those emotions kind of calm down, because like I said, they're going to be there. But
it's so weird to have a Game 7 at such an early start time too. Like, I just feel like that's such an uncomfortable thing. I hate that that's the scenario. I hate that we've played so many of these kind of early games. Like, I know the first one went very well, so I can't be totally attached to the baggage there. But given how the one in Orlando went, given how the one in New York went, maybe the trend there, and maybe what we should be banking on here, is that it goes well for the home team. Like, I'm noticing that even as I'm just talking. So maybe that's what I should be banking on here.
You know what? At this point, I'll take it. I'll go ahead, just feed me whatever. Like, when it comes to that, like, again, especially having the home crowd, I think that's going to be the biggest thing. I know Orlando is going to have a lot of high emotions after this one, especially, but for the Cavs to have this kind of crowd coming back, I think is going to be interesting. And I think that, honestly, it's why, and I know a lot of people will say this, and I know it gets way overused, but I truly mean the fans will make a difference in this game. And the not just the fans, the electricity and the atmosphere will make a difference in this game. I've been to Game 7s as a fan, and again, I've seen
bit braggy, but
a bit. I went as a kid, and I've gone as I've gotten older. But again, just that crowd and some of those quick turnovers, and when the crowd is into it, you can feel it, especially for Cleveland in that building. That the acoustics, everything, you can feel that electricity, and that's why the fans make it that much more of an impact. And also on top of it, it affects those role players. It affects those guys, not just the stars. And that's where all of a sudden it takes that game to the next level, and you feel it that much more.
Yeah, honestly, as much as I hate being in this situation, as much as it's stressful, as much as I'm seeing, bad faith takes and stuff like that, and people, being prisoner of the moment, I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see the Cavs tested, because, as much as I hate to see when those tests don't get passed, it's still like, that's what it comes down to when you're a fan, right? Like, it's these kind of live or die moments. I don't want to be sitting here and thinking about, Jalen Suggs hitting half-court shots in the same way that I think of Rafer Alston banking in threes. But, like, that's the type of stuff we rally around, right, as Cavs fans. It's both the good and the bad. Like, that's part of the shared experience and part of the community experience of sports. And man, I'm excited. Like, I think, even in a limited state, you feel better going into a Game 7 when you have a player like Donovan Mitchell. I'm excited to see what everybody else who's playing in their first ever Game 7, what they bring to the table, who rises to the occasion, and who kind of steps up and feeds off of that crowd. And when you're looking on the other side of the court, and it's a bunch of Orlando Magic players that haven't played in the Game 7, there's a big unknown there as well, right? So this is what you play for. This is why you earn home court in the first round of the playoffs, is to have this type of game, this type of important moment for the franchise on home court, and just hope that they can pull it together and just do everything you need to do. Whether that's little rituals, whether that's making sure you don't invite Mac Robinson onto the podcast to talk about it after the game, like, just whatever superstitions you need to do, make sure you're doing them all, baby.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with the not inviting Mac Robinson on the podcast. I completely agree with that one.
It's just a dangerous game. I just can't.
You can't tempt fate. You can't tempt fate. And the one thing I will say, though, is that the ones that I'm really interested to see how they play, and not only how they play, but also how they help the others, is going to be Max Strus, Marcus Morris, and Tristan. They have that experience throughout their career. Max was with Miami. They went on plenty of deep runs, and again, dealing with those hostile environments. And again, Morris and Tristan have both been in these situations throughout their career. And, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of help some of these younger players. And I also wonder how many minutes these guys get because of their experience that they've had in the past, in this type of an environment, to see how much run they necessarily get in that Game 7.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Like I said, I'm not going to be sleeping. So I think win, lose, or draw, I'm going to be exhausted Sunday afternoon when we record after that game. Hopefully it is not the last game of the season. God, it's terrifying.
Justin, I will say this: every playoff game, and I've said this constantly, every playoff game that I watch, I feel like takes at least a year off of my lifespan. So we'll see if I make it after Game 7 at that point.
Look at these grays. Look at these grays as I take my hat off. Look at these damn grays, man. Like I'm gaining a new row every single time there's one of these games, and this is. I honestly hate when Garland, Allen, and Mobley first kind of came together. There were so many times, every time they accomplished something, it was the first time without LeBron, the first time without LeBron, and like sometimes I feel like let's just kind of move on from that. But I do think from like a fan perspective, this being the first time I've gone into a Game 7 without LeBron, like, that changes the calculus, man. We always had the best player on the planet in these. Like, this is scary. This is new. I guess this is what it feels like for other teams. But I still feel like at the end of the day, we have the best player in the series in Donovan Mitchell, and that's a really, really important factor going into one of these games.
Yeah, and I would say not only do we have the best player, but also out of any of these players on both these teams, if you had to pick one player to take over a game, it's going to be Donovan. And so, again, to have him on your squad, dealing with an injury or not, I think it's a game changer that you have to deal with and you have to plan for, and that always gives you an advantage. And so I feel like that's something where the Cavs have that going for them already. And again, just going into this type of an environment, you need to have somebody that has that mentality. Again, you don't put up 18 points in the final quarter just because, you know what, I guess I'll do it this time. It's okay. Like, no, he has that mentality where he's willing to to say, hey, give me the ball. I will put this team on my back and I will try to carry us to a W. Yeah. I think that's massive, especially in that kind of an environment and that kind of an electric atmosphere. I think it's going to be massive.
It is going to be massive. It is a massive moment for the Cavs franchise, and I'm very excited to see it. If you are going to the game and you're listening to this here podcast, make sure you are loud as hell for me, because I'm going to be loud, not too loud in my house, because I have to protect my voice for podcasting after, but it's probably going to be a little hoarse. Just giving you a warning, fair warning.
Loud enough for your neighbors to give you a noise complaint?
No, my neighbors are chill.
They're there we
good.
go.
Yeah,
there we go.
We're good. I think it's insulated well and whatnot. It's
okay,
but it's always a dicey proposition when you live in a townhouse. But at least that is the benefit of an early game. Is you can't really be doing that at noon Central Time. So
I got to say this too. Also as a Browns fan, I'm used to yelling at my TV at 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. So I mean, it's gonna feel right at home for me.
Yeah, but Cleveland's such a great sports city. Everybody's yelling at their TV at the same time.
Exactly.
I have to explain why I'm yelling. That's the thing. Unless it's a Jets game, unless it's a Bombers game, then I have to explain when I'm yelling. But Mac, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Always fun to catch up with you and to talk to you. Before I wrap this thing up, do you want to let the people know what you got going on? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at MacRobinson95. It's been a great final playoff appearance on the Chase Down.
Yeah,
I
never
appreciate
again.
it.
Never
Yeah,
again.
of course not. Of course not. I'm a superstitious guy, and again, I appreciate the graciousness trying to fix last year's wrong, but we've made it into a streak here.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
The
man,
Cavs
I
are
went the
playing
wrong
playoff
drop.
basketball.
I went the wrong drop. I want to boo.
Boo this man.
Better. Much, much better.
Thank you.
Boo, Mac. Thank you so
They
much
are
for
playing
coming on.
playoff basketball, and again, I will receive the boost.
Yes, you know what? It worked. I thought RJ being in on the booth would have given us some good vibes, but he didn't get it done. That's unfortunate to see. Mac, thank you so much. Big thanks to everyone that's watching on YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to support us, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send you a screenshot or via to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.